Well, it's kind of funny to watch Mitt Romney and Jeb Bush quarrel over which of them is the head of the establishment for the Republican Party. I think Rush it was pointing out, it wasn't too long ago, that the Republican establishment denied that there was a Republican establishment. And now you've got Mitt Romney and Jeb Bush saying that they are the titular head of the establishment. They're the establishment candidate. We're talking about Karl Rove, we're talking about big money insiders, we're talking about heads of corporations that want illegal immigrants to be made legal because they want cheap labor. We're talking about people who orchestrate campaigns so that they woo the religious right, so that they get our vote, they get our money, and then they betray us. I want you to think back to Ronald Reagan. The establishment did not like Ronald Reagan. They thought that he was unelectable. And two of the largest landslide victories in the history of the United States were Ronald Reagan being elected and then re-elected, stomping Mondale into the earth. So I want you to remember that Ronald Reagan was really conservative. This is the president who called Russia the evil empire, the Soviet Union, the evil empire. This is the man who won the Cold War without firing a shot, a man who was dedicated to the pro-life cause, wrote a book while he was in office defending the unborn. He was really conservative. Believed in prayer in schools. I mean, Ronald Reagan was the real article. And the establishment didn't like him. But when he won the primary in 1980 over George Bush, by the way, George Bush the elder, you remember George Bush ran in 1988. I'm sorry, in 1980 against Ronald Reagan in the primary. And Reagan ended up picking him as his running mate to help him carry Texas. So when we look at establishment Republicans and their lies to us that we can't have somebody who's unelectable, well, that's what you said about Ronald Reagan. That's, Mitt Romney was supposed to be this great establishment Republican who was going to be elected by the moderates and by the independents and by the people in the middle. Well, as it turns out, he wasn't President Romney. He was sent into political oblivion because he couldn't mobilize the base. Now, what I think that would be a really good lesson for us to learn is that while the Republican establishment is taking us for granted and wants our money and wants our vote, especially wants our vote, and wants us to pound the pavement for their mushy moderate candidates, we need to remember that we can throw elections by either not voting or by voting for third-party candidates who actually espouse the principles we believe in. Say, oh, Randall, then the Democrats win. Yeah. And you tell me the difference between the Republicans and the Democrats. At least with the Republican Party, the argument goes, there is a home for Tea Party activists. There is a home for pro-life activists. There is a home for marriage between a man and a woman activists. It's the Republican Party, because much of the machinery of the party at the local level, at the state level, is controlled by grassroots conservatives, all right? But we need to remember that if we would teach a lesson or two to the John Boehners and the Mitch McConnells, if we would put a couple of mediocre, moderate political scalps on the wall, then perhaps the Republican establishment would get a clue. Now, to be honest with you, I don't think they will. I don't think they will. I think that they want so-called moderates because they just don't like us. I mean, Jeb Bush endorsed my opponent. I ran for the state Senate in Florida in 2006 in a Republican primary. I ran against a child-killing, the Jim King, who was a supporter of child killing and who single-handedly led the fight to see that Terry Schiavo was starved to death, okay? And what did Jeb Bush do in that primary? He came, held a press conference, endorsing my opponent and speaking against me. That's the kind of man that Jeb Bush is. Party machinery man. Put party ahead of principle. Put party ahead of human life. Do what you got to do. I don't want a president like that. I just don't.
You have two choices. I mean, you can try to raise your children by design, or you will raise them by default. There are no perfect parents. We're going to get it wrong sometimes. If we have a plan, we've got a better chance of getting it right in the long run.
There is something deep within the heart of every human being that longs for parental acceptance and approval. When does a boy become a man?
Get a group of guys around and ask them that question.
I don't think there's a certain age. Some men stay boys their whole life.
I would say, 16, 18 years old.
Wow, that's a good question.
When they get bar mitzvah?
Well, I think when he has a child. So I just became at 56, 56 years old.
Without the power of the Holy Spirit changing us and giving us power over our sin, we can't hope to be the dads that our kids need us to be.